Hello and welcome to TRT World Forum 2020's reflections session on the power of music in the days of the pandemic. Today, I will host distinguished guests to discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the world of music. To talk about concert halls and opera during the pandemic, I'm joined by the General Director of the State Opera and Ballet of Turkey, Murat Karahan. Thanks a lot for joining us on TRT World Forum today. So let's start with this. Why don't you tell us how, in general, you were affected? I mean, you, obviously, as a person, but also the State Opera and Ballet of Turkey from COVID-19.
Okay. Hello again. Actually, first of all, I should explain that we affiliated with the State Opera and Ballet. We have 6 established opera and ballet houses in 6 different cities, including Ankara, Istanbul, Mersin, Antalya, and Samsun. And Izmir. The pandemic has deeply affected the art of opera and ballet in our country, as in the whole world, because both in terms of using orchestra pit and close contacting, the probability of being infected is quite high. Assuming that at least 150 people, including the technical and backstage crew, taking office in just for one night in an opera and ballet performance. Since the first days of pandemic, the world's foremost companies had to cease their performances for a long time. After taking break in the few months of pandemic, our State Opera and Ballet reopened its curtains during a new normalization period, especially with the help of the climatic conditions. We organized many performances and 3 festivals that almost all of them were held in the open air and theaters and the stages. Of course, we have reached the audience with pieces which have a new perspective, with a more minimalized way and with concert versions without using the orchestra pits.
Okay, what is the situation now?
The situation now, in these days, since the weather is getting colder and the pandemic is spreading faster, we don't have the opportunity to perform in open stages now. It's impossible for us. For this reason, we are presenting our performances with the smallest smallest companies possible, as well with a reduced number of artists.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of an experience is it? I mean, obviously this question might be addressed to a performer, but also for you as the director of the State Opera and Ballet of Turkey. I mean, less people, a lot of restrictions, and then there is art going on stage. I mean, how does it come into being, you think?
With the new perspective, we are trying to take all possible measures to ensure that our artists perform in an environment with minimum risk. And I would like to express that it's our priority to keep out our artists safe, while also trying to not to leave audience without art, because we have got an important duty that we should bring art to our audience to make them happy and positive.
Yeah, and I wonder how actually you do that. I mean, how do you keep your performers, positive and motivated during times like this?
Actually, it's not easy for us, because also they are afraid of about this situation. But as I told you before, we changed, we reduced the amounts of the artists in the performances, and then we reduced the numbers of the artists in the companies, and with a new vision we are making little pieces of arts in this period, because it's not possible for us to make with a huge amount of artists, for example 150 artists and technique in one night in the one stage. It's impossible for us.
Mm-hmm. And before we wrap up, Murat, you are state funded. So I wonder how you were affected by all this financially. I mean, without the ticket sales, I'm sure it made a difference.
Yeah, it's actually very important, and it brings it shows us the importance of the system in Turkey, because for example, many opera and ballet companies are in a big crisis now in Europe and in the world, but we are the 6 opera houses and ballets are 100% supported by the government. That is why our artists or our companies has not any problem in this situation. Our artists could get their salaries, their full salaries. But for example, in many countries in Europe, in many opera houses, they had to stop performing, and they had to cut the salaries of the artists. But we don't have any problem like this in Turkey.
Okay, well, lovely to hear that as a Turkish person. Murat Karahan, good to have you on TRT World Forum today. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
And now let's talk to the pianist, Viking Gurlovson, about how he was impacted by the restrictions. Hi there, it's good to have you with us today. So, I'm not going to ask you about how your lockdown was, because I know that it was pretty productive and amazing, really. You released a new album. You enjoyed exceptional chart success with it. You became BBC Radio 4 Front Row's Artist in Residence, and you created and presented your own classical music series on TV. Wow, anything I missed?
Yeah, you know, when this all happened in March and April, it was really like going back 10 years in time before I had the kind of career that I have today, where everything is running like a smooth machine. And instead, I had to really think everything sort of from scratch and try to sort of save myself, because I hate being idle, having nothing to do. And so, yeah, so I really felt like I was just 10 years younger, and everything was sort of, I had to do it myself. I had to find new ideas. And it's not easy when you don't have an audience in concert halls. And then I realized how much what I do is actually for the people, for my audience. Without my audience, it's really hard to survive. But then there are other ways. And like you said, TV, radio, those were my sort of go-to. But also, you know, releasing the album was very interesting. Some people told me I should not release the album because of COVID. But that made no sense, because people were at home waiting for something to happen. So I think releasing an album at the end of March was actually the best time in my life, probably, to release an album, because people were so grateful for it. But that's one thing that has happened now, is that I've realized, also I have played a few concerts, you know, maybe for 50% or 25% concert audiences, depending on the local rules. But I have realized how much it matters to those people and what the power of concerts really is, and how it kind of connects people. It's very interesting. I feel these days when I play for 25% crowd or 50% crowd, the reaction is actually stronger than for a sold out crowd in a big hall in London. I mean, people are just somehow different. And I think when we come out of this, we will hopefully remember that music is not to be taken for granted.
Wow, okay. Well, I would assume, I'm not a musician myself, so I think just a regular person would assume that restrictions would stop you from easily connecting to your audience, or as easy, you know, compared to the past. But I guess that wasn't what happened to you, from what I've heard.
we are so lucky in a way that this happens now in 2020 and not in the year 1995 or 2000. I mean, the technology that we have today with smartphones, with iPads, with everything, makes it possible for almost anybody to become their own broadcaster from home, practically. And so what I've seen also from other people around me, whether they're doing for TV, radio, or their own podcasts or their own live concerts at home, this would have been impossible 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So in a way, we are lucky with that. Music has a way of finding its way to the right people, to the right ears. That's what I felt with the pandemic. And I think in a way, it's very interesting. It's really dark times for the industry, you know. All the concert houses, the suffering, all the orchestras, all the young artists, it's horrible. At the same time, in a way, never before have people listened so much to classical music. You see it with the 2020 streaming numbers. They're higher than ever before in history for classical music. And the rise in classical is more than any other genre, I am told. So in a way, it's really strange times. It's great time for music, great time for classical music. It's horrible time for all the freelance artists and all the organizers.
Okay, that's a very fair picture. You're one of 2020's fastest streaming core classical artists. So you're a good person to ask this question to. Why do you think the interest into classical music in particular rose during these times?
I think when people are at home or when they are sort of going into a more introspection mode, then I think classical music very much speaks to them. It's the kind of music that you can listen to again and again and again and again, and you can always find something new. And somehow I feel this music very often mirrors you. It teaches you something about yourself. And I think this year has been all about that for so many of us, learning something new about ourselves in unprecedented circumstances. So I think in that way, classical is really wonderful. But classical, again, doesn't mean anything, this word. There are so many different musics in classical music. But yeah, this is something that I feel just around me. You know, I feel different kind of interest. 20 years ago, everybody was saying that classical music is about to die. But that's the same with 100 years ago, 50 years ago. They're always saying that classical music is dying, but yet always more and more people are listening to it. So it's a funny story.
So, okay, I am just not going to ask that question to you. No, I wasn't planning to either anyways, but I want to ask you about how you approach your art and whether it changed during the pandemic. I mean, we talked about the surrounding situation around your music, but then when it comes to the music itself, what kind of a shift did you observe in it?
I think with any creative work, the more time you have to spend on your projects, the better. So sometimes in life, in classical music life, in the kind of career I have, you have to play too many concerts in too short span of time. And now there are much fewer concerts, of course. And it means that for every concert and for every piece, you simply have more time, you can go deeper. And the more time you spend on a single musical phrase, I think the more meaningful it will become. And there's nothing that can replace time in this. And so, you know, when you think back 70 years, people played fewer concerts than today, because today you can jump on a plane, or you used to before COVID. And now we've gone back a little bit to a more, I think, deeper way of thinking about music and having more time with every single phrase. It just makes it more meaningful and more beautiful, I believe.
Okay. Vikingur, you, I believe, have synesthesia, if I'm not mistaken. So you associate keys with colors. So in that sense, I wonder how this whole process influenced you because, well, I'm sure you saw less colors because you were more indoors or you weren't really freely traveling. So did that have any sort of effect on your music? I'm looking for a poetic answer here.
Oh, yes, but you know, there are so many colors indoor. Look behind me. You have this beautiful work here by my Icelandic compatriot, Magnus Helgason, in yellow, of course, mostly. That's in A for me. This is the key of A major, actually. And then you have this here in blue. This is by Icelandic artist Ragnar Kjartansson. This is definitely in F. So actually, I see colors everywhere. Look at the ceiling here. It's brown. That's D. So, you know, on the wall is white, it's C. And then you have a black lamp, it's in C minor, actually. So you have C major and C minor on the wall behind me. I probably sound like a crazy person, but that's how I feel. So actually, it hasn't been affected at all, but maybe you notice the colors indoors and around you more strikingly.
Okay. Viking Gurlovson, this was really interesting. Thanks a lot for sharing your story with us today on Theater World Forum. And now I'm joined by another pianist and composer, Büşra Kayıkçı. Hi there, good to see you today. Join us. So let's start with this. You could be a rare example of the pandemic. You made a name for yourself during the lockdown months, I assume. Why don't you tell me and our viewers about the whole story?
Well, I have two sides of this story, actually. At first, it was an advantage for me because just a couple of months ago, before the lockdown, I released my debut album and the single. And I released all of them independently. And if you are an indie artist, which means you're working without a manager, without a label, without a producer or a booking agency, there is only one territory you should be focused on seriously, which is online, which is digital platforms. So as you know, everyone was at home looking at their screens and looking for something new to discover. And I was there waiting to be discovered. So it brought me lots of advantages, I would say.
And how did you spend your lockdown months?
Well, I had very nice contacts with some international music channels and some labels, some agency. You know, it's almost impossible to organize some physical shows with the venues, with the global venues. But when it comes to online, it's just one click. You at your home and your iPhone, and suddenly you're in Germany, you're in France, you're in UK. So I did lots of live shows, and that's how I expanded my fan base internationally. And it also brought me very good, audience, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So do you think it would have been harder for you if you were starting your career during quote-unquote normal times, not, a pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, it was already 3 months, and my streaming numbers was not in the level that I was expected. But with the live stream shows during the lockdown, I received really good numbers, 2.5 million in one video, I would say.
Wow. Okay. What do you think spoke to that many people about your music and you as a performer?
Well, I believe both my profile and me maybe as a multidisciplinary artist, because I try to keep my social media busy, not just with music, but also with other artistic materials I use and work on.
Mm-hmm. So what you did during the lockdown months is that you actually performed live at the Istanbul Jazz Festival before everything closed down again in Istanbul, in Turkey.
Yes.
How was that? What kind of an experience was that for you?
Well, for me, it was my first experience as just me and with my material on stage. I had stage experience before, of course, but it was always with a team. For the first time being on a stage that prestigious in my homeland is something I am very proud of, I would say.
Mm-hmm. But also, there were some restrictions around the concert and the performances during the festival. So, I mean, it was your first performance, I understand that. So it's a little bit more, it's trickier to ask this question. But I wonder what kind of an experience is it to have restrictions involved in a live performance?
Well, I can't compare it I think enough if you put it that way. But the arrangements were super safe. I didn't feel any stress. It was all full of excitement and joy for me. With friends, it was a very close show because there are restrictions in the tickets. So most of them was full with friends and family.
Okay, well, that's expected, I guess. So I want to talk about, I mean, you mentioned that you're an interdisciplinary artist, you're an interior architect as well, and your relation with space is very important to you. And actually, your music is pretty much interlinked with the idea of space. So, was it a psychological challenge for you to stay indoors, or, you know, not really experience many different spaces during the course of the past year, really, the pandemic?
Well, first of all, I am an introvert character. I don't feel so much pressure when I'm at home, basically. But it's nice to travel to places with beautiful landscapes. Those spaces inspire me a lot. Referring on creating spaces with music was something I was imagining in my mind, not just physically. I mean, I believe that musicians create spaces through performance with musical materials in both their minds and in audiences' minds.
Okay, Büşra, this was a very prolific time frame for you, I assume. But I wonder what you have learned from it so far. The pandemic itself, you making a name for yourself, and also, you know, staying indoors.
Well, I've experienced the importance of using social media effectively, basically, because I always thought it would take a very large time to reach to the international audience. But somehow all these things switched to something else, to another format. So I try to keep the content. I try to create some other contents for YouTube, for, again, digital platforms. Well, this is how it will continue for a long time, I believe. I just try to focus what I have in my hands, but not try to dream about what will be in the future. Just focus on what work you have right now in the moment.
And is this a lesson that you think you're going to carry for your whole lifetime, that the pandemic gave you?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Büşra Kayıkçı, thanks a lot for joining us today on TRT World Forum and sharing your story with us. Good luck. That's it from me, Elif Bereketli, for now on TRT World Forum. I would like to thank our guests for joining us and sharing their thoughts with us on the importance of music during troubled times, how to survive and sometimes even thrive as a musician under restrictions, and what the future might hold for the world of music. TRT World Forum 2020 will continue to discuss shifting dynamics, the international order in a post-pandemic world. Do stay with us.